Hey, Steve here. Welcome back to my channel. I know it's been a while since I posted any videos, but I have been working on stuff. I just haven't had time to edit videos and post them to YouTube, so you'll eventually start seeing some more stuff from me. But for now, this is just going to be a quick video on how to inject a 3D printed mold. I have gone over a lot of this information in other videos and snippets here and there, but I keep getting asked, like, what are my settings? How am I doing this without melting molds? So I just want to get this all into one quick video. That way, when people keep asking me, I can just point them to this video and hopefully it answers their questions. So I'm going to jump on the computer here, go over my print settings, and then we'll get into actually injecting a mold. Okay, here we are in Simplified 3D, which is my preferred slicer, and this is the mold I'm going to be injecting today. This is a mini Reaper style bait. If you follow me on Instagram, you may have already seen this because I post all my stuff there first. So if you ever want a sneak peek of what I'm working on, give me a follow over there. I go by the Never Ending Projects list, which is the same name as my website. But this was just a test to try out something different. This has a cuttlefish style Reaper tail like I did on one of my other Reapers, but instead of doing a wavy split line along the tail, I split this one right down the middle because I want to see if these baits will pull out of this mold without tearing and hold their shape. And this will also allows me to get like an 8 cavity on a smaller footprint. So as for print settings, I usually print a mold at 25% infill. But anywhere where the plastisol is going to touch the face of this bait, I want that face to be at least 1.5 millimeters of solid plastic. So for those print settings, I'm usually printing at a 0.10 layer height, which means my top layers need to be at least 15 to equal that 1.5. Bottom solid layers really doesn't matter because that's the outside edge of the mold. And for outline perimeters, I usually shoot for around 4 to 6. In this mold, I'm doing 5. And the reason for that number is I'm using a 0.35 nozzle, which extrudes at 0.40 millimeters. So you figure 0.4 times 5 is at least 2 millimeters, so that's better than the 1.5 I'm going after. So let me prepare to print this. I do use 2 processes on some molds. And the reason is that just speeds things up because the first, say, 9 millimeters of this mold, I print at a 0.20 layer height because that's only the tail and I don't really need it as smooth. But once it hits that front section of the body, I want it smoother, so that's where I change to a 0.10 layer height. Let me show you the cross section here. And you can see with 5 outlines, you got about 2 millimeters. And then down the bottom here with 15, you got about 1.5 millimeters of thickness, and this is all the garbage infill. And if I slide that back and forth, you can see its thickness stays about the same. For the 20 layer height, I think I used about 8 layers, so it's still thick enough. But whatever you're printing for a layer height, you just divide 1.5 by your layer height, and that'll give you how many top layers you need. But that's about that. So let me actually bring up a picture of the mold being printed. You get a better feel for it. See, this is the infill, and then this is going to be all the solid plastic of the tail. That should be enough to keep the plastisol from melting the mold, but the keyword is should, but we'll go over that later. For now, that is the print settings I use. So let's go down in the shop and we'll start injecting this mold and see what happens. Here we are in the shop, and I got the molds all printed up, ready to go. Now, I print these in PLA+. And I think most of my comments and questions on these things are, why don't I print in ABS or PETG or nylon, something like that, that's higher temp, that'll be much better. And well, I don't like printing in ABS because it stinks. PETG has a lot of stringing issues. I hear nylon's a pain in the ass to print with. I've never tried it, but I like PLA. It's what works for me. Now, PLA has a melting temperature somewhere around, I think, 130 to 180 degrees Celsius. My printer won't even start pushing plastic till it reaches 170 Celsius, which converts somewhere around, I think, 338 Fahrenheit. So when I'm shooting my plastisol, I shoot for that magic number of 300 Fahrenheit, so it doesn't totally destroy my mold. Now, if you shoot too hot or you shoot too much pressure, this is what's going to happen. You're actually just going to blow through the mold at some point. This one actually happened to be screwed up print settings, and when it blows through, it actually just fills up the mold. Fortunately, I was able to keep using this mold. I think I shot this another 10-15 times and didn't have any issues. Another one I screwed up before was a tiny mold. I used way too much pressure because, I mean, it only uses a tiny amount of plastic to fill this thing, and I wasn't thinking and pushed a little too hard, and it blew through on the pretty much the crown of the mold there, which is might not have been as thick. But again, shot this one 10 times too, no problems. Like once you fill that up with plastic, it pretty much seals it up anyway. So fortunately, I kept using those. So now when I inject, I keep an eye on the rod and I watch how much it moves. And as soon as it stops, that's when I stop pushing. And I mean, I use light pressure. I'm only using 2 fingers on this little knob up here. I see some guys hanging off their extruders, like with aluminum molds. They're pushing as hard as they can. You don't want to do that with a 3D printed mold. You will absolutely destroy this thing. So I'm going to get this all set up. I'll clamp this up, make some plastisol, and we'll actually give this thing a shot and see what happens. Now, I have shot this bait, so I know it works. I did a 3-cavity test mold, and I shot this a whole bunch of times, and the baits come out great. I haven't shot this 8-cavity yet, so we'll see if this one works flawless or not. Normally, I don't lube up my molds. That's another thing I always get. Why don't I lube my molds up? I haven't really had any issues. This one I probably will, just because the tails are so far deep in there, and hopefully it keeps it from sticking together. First time I shoot any of these molds, they kind of do melt together in certain places, so I started adding mold crackers to them, but that only happens on the first time. Every time after that, they come apart perfect. So let me get some plastisol mixed up, and we'll give this thing a shot. Alright, for plastisol, I am going to be using Dead On Plastics Worm Blend, and just going to mix that in a 1 cup measuring cup. I do small batches, so this is probably going to be maybe 2/3 of a cup. Whatever you're using for plastisol, just follow the manufacturer's recommended heating instructions. For Dead On Plastics, we're going to heat it up to at least 350 degrees to start. Here we go. I am at about what'd that say? 362, 370, so that's pretty good. For color, I'm just going to be using a white mica powder. This is going to be pretty boring. I just want a white opaque bait, and I'm going to add some black flake to it. Nothing too exciting. And I do this while it's cooling down, because like I said before, I have to let this cool down to at least 300. So once I get this where I want it, I can add a little bit of flake. Maybe a little more. I don't want to go too crazy. .327, and I'm just going to keep stirring this, let the heat out. Keep everything mixed up. Put my glove back on, because safety first. Keep checking this. Here we go, 301, close enough. So here we go. Hopefully you can see this. Just gonna suck it up and slowly inject with light pressure. I don't know if you can see the lines on that, but I'm just going in nice and slow until it stops. Now you kind of got to have to learn the mold. So the first one might not come out, but it's better to have some messed up baits than to wreck the mold. So there it goes, it stopped. So I'm just going to hold a little bit of pressure on that for a bit. And pull that out, top off my sprue. Clean out my extruder. And we're going to let that sit for a bit. Now a 3D printed mold doesn't dissipate the heat like an aluminum mold will, so I actually let this sit for at least 5, maybe even 10 minutes, just to make sure it's all cooled down and set up. So I'm going to let that do that, and we'll be back. All right, let's open this thing up, see what it looks like. All right, like I said, the first one always sticks together. That's why you call it a mold cracker. Looks promising. Still a little warm. I'll let it sit for at least, I think it was about 10 minutes. Okay, a couple of them didn't shoot, but that's just because I didn't really press too hard. Actually, no, that's actually pretty good, I think. Let me get them out of there completely. Yeah, that one's got a little bit of a round tail, but still fishable. But there you go. A little warm. I'm going to hang these up to cure a little longer. Just throw them over here for now. Let's look at that one that's by itself. Not too bad. Those came out perfect. I actually like that color. That's exactly what I was going for. These are, I don't know if you can see that. I did vent the tails a little bit on this mold. Most of the times I don't even vent the molds because 3D printed molds don't go together as tight as aluminum, so there is enough air clearance for that, but that's basically how you shoot a 3D printed mold. I'm going to slap this together and shoot one more time just to make sure we can duplicate everything. So I'm going to set that all up and we'll see what happens again. Okay, just to recap, I got my plastic heated up. We're letting it cool back down to 300 Fahrenheit. And we're going to give this mold another injection. Just stirring out the heat. Should be about good. Almost there. It's about 310, which is close enough. So I'm going to suck up the plastic. Start injection. Just 2 fingers of pressure, nice and slow. Watching that line. And as soon as it stops, just hold pressure for a bit. This mold has some small gates in it, so I do have to inject slowly, but slowly usually works best anyway. Alright, just going to pop that out, top off my sprue, and clean out my injector. And wait another 5 or 10 minutes. Alright, let's see if this batch came out. This actually should pull apart no problem this time. It only really sticks on the first injection. Looks like they all shot that time anyway. Again, I waited about 10 minutes before demolding this. Maybe a little bit longer this time because they're a little cooler. There you go. Surprisingly, this mold has very little flashing on it. It is a bit of a downside with 3D printed molds. They don't, like I said, they don't fit together as tight as an aluminum, so you do get some flashing occasionally, but it peels right off. So alright, I am going to hang these up, and maybe we'll shoot this little mold just to show you how little plastic goes in there and you don't have to push the extruder too much. So let me get this all set up and we'll give that a shot too, just for fun. Alright, before I move on to the teeny mold, I went back and looked at this first batch of baits I injected, and the bottom four didn't shoot cleanly. You can see this is a nice jagged edge compared to how it's just supposed to be a nice smooth pattern. But like I said, that's to be expected. You got to learn the mold, and I didn't press as hard as I could have. But as I mentioned, it's better to have a few misshapen baits than to wreck a mold, so it's not a big deal. We're just going to throw these back in the pot, remelt them down, and inject them again. Okay, just for fun, going to shoot this one POV style. Close enough. See how far this goes? That's it right there. So I'm just going to hold pressure. Pop it out. Fill up my sprue. And that's it. Okay, see how these came out. This is a slightly different color. This is one of the Paragon colorants from Dead On Plastics. I don't know if it shows up, but it's like a white, changes to blue. But yeah, these have a little bit of flashing. But you can see, and when injecting these, it didn't take much plastic. So you're only moving that whole rod about a 1/4 inch, if that. But these are my little 1.5 inch swim baits. These things are killer. I fish these on a custom jig head. I'll show you that after. But let me get all these baits together and we'll do a little final show and tell, and that'll be that. Okay, so that's basically how I shoot a 3D printed mold made out of PLA. I'm sure there's different ways you could do things. This is just how I did it. And I'm sure there's different filaments you could use. I'm sure my comment section is going to tell me what I should have made them out of, but I'm sticking with PLA because that's what I like. You guys can do whatever you want. The only other question I get asked a lot is, what is the durability of these molds? How long do they last? And unfortunately, I can't answer that because normally I only make enough baits for myself. I don't mass produce these, I don't sell them, so I usually print a few up and then I move on to the next design. What I can tell you is, looking back at my core shot mold, this is probably the one I've shot the most. I've probably shot this between doing the cores and the outer shells. I've probably shot this maybe 20, 30 times. I don't know. I made a lot of grubs. I gave a few away. And this one's still going. The only thing that usually happens is they warp a bit. You can see it doesn't squeeze together. But when I clamp this back up, I usually have no problems. It clamps up flat. If you really wanted to, you could probably put this on your heated print bed and it will flatten back out after a little while. Other than that, they hold up pretty well. This one does have a little bit of wall separation on some parts. You can see it there, but that has more to do with my under extruding plastic. You can see that top layer is not very good. Like I said before, I don't spend a lot of time messing with print settings. I just kind of print stuff and go. If things go really bad, you can always print another mold. As for the finished lures, this is a little kit I was throwing together for myself. I just injected some different colors that I thought would work. These are the white ones you saw me make, and I actually going to fish these with a 5/32 custom made bullet jig head. I haven't actually had these in the water yet, but I have high hopes for them. And then we have the little swim bait I was working on. I haven't got very far on this kit yet, but this is the little jig head for this one I made. Again, I think these are 5/32 size 2 hook, but I need to make a slightly larger one of these for something else I'm working on. So I think for my next video, I'm going to go over the design, how you make the mold box, how you pour the actual silicone mold, and everything up to pouring the lead. So if that's something you're interested in, think about subscribing. Other than that, as always, I just want to say thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.